Precinct 3 in Easton.
Okay, so you have a little bit of Easton in there too. And how do you juggle the responsibilities between working with the three communities where you already have experience in West Bridgewater, you have roots in Brockton, not so sure about Easton, but you know, and even in Easton, you're dealing with kind of a different dynamic there where you have kind of an affluent community as opposed to Brockton where you have a blue-collar community. Kind of, you really have to walk the line.
I'd say there's a mix. I wouldn't divide it per se on class, but there's different advantages. Brockton obviously has a different infrastructure and provides a variety of public services. We've got hospitals and healthcare in the city. We don't have that in the other communities. Different forms of housing, especially for those that are either low income, seniors. I mean, these are great services that Brockton absorbs and really does a favor for the surrounding towns. As far as juggling the responsibilities, I don't think it's going to be any different than what it's been for me as a selectman. I'm on call 24/7. I get calls at night, I get them on the weekend, early morning. I never know what's going to happen, what's coming. It hasn't been a problem for me. You just kind of roll with the punches, but you've got to have a vision, and I think that's important. In this election, we're focusing on the next 17 years, not the previous 17.
Now, you decided early on to finish out your term as a selectman in West Bridgewater to devote yourself to this race. And as you just said, you'd consider yourself to be, some people will even say these are part-time jobs, but in my mind, it's a full-time job. What about different things like, like sometimes we read in the Enterprise, the per diems. They pay the guys to go to work up at the State House, you know? How do you feel about stuff like that, and how much time do you think will be involved in your time to be doing this?
I think quite a bit. To me, it is a full-time job and then some. I mean, you have to structure your life to some extent around that. And I think people don't realize, no matter who you are, if you're an elected official, you're giving something up. You really are. And I have a lot of respect for those that serve in that capacity. The per diems, it's a great issue. Why take that? Why be paid to travel to Boston to do your job and vote? I think that's wrong. I think if anything, it could be merged into the salary or not even included at all, but it shouldn't be a separate form of compensation. I'm here to serve the residents of this district. I'm here to vote and advocate for them. That's part of my job. What was very disconcerting is I know the Enterprise had published a list of how many days of travel some of the area legislators had going into Boston, and quite frankly, it varied. It was from, I think, 49 up to 225 for a state representative that's closer to the city. So the issue is, are you really working in the best interests of your district and the people you serve? And arguably, as a state representative, you're making policy for everyone in this Commonwealth, and you've got to take that seriously.
Yeah, because a lot of people at home are just sitting there saying, well, no one pays me to get to my job, I mean.
Well, and what disturbs me, I hear the refrain from certain legislators, well, we're just the messenger. We're sorry we're bringing you bad news. We're just the messenger. And I look at it differently. As a selectman, I'm one of three. If somebody's getting laid off, if I'm not generating revenue for my community, that's my fault. I can't blame that on anyone else. That's my responsibility, and I've got to answer to my constituents. So I would disagree that it's just being a messenger. You're a policymaker, and it's time we have people that actually have a vision and want to get some prosperity back to the middle class, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah, I'd say that the most important job of a state rep outside of taking the concerns of the residents and the constituents would be how much state funding can you get for your district? How would you go about getting state funding for this district? And do you have any ideas about who you might want to work with? And
absolutely.
You said you already worked there in the past. Do you maybe have connections? Maybe you want to explain some of that?
Sure. Not so much connections. I know the good aspects of the legislature, and primarily they're all good people. But we also read about the negative aspect, and there's something with the culture that people just, I don't know if it's a go along to get along culture, but they don't always take the right vote or the right position for what's best for the district. And I'm looking to change that culture. I did work in the legislature years ago, and I'll say this, as far as trying to bring back state aid, everybody's clawing to get as much money as they can from the pot. That's part of the focus. The other half should be, what can we do to generate income locally? What can we do for the greater Brockton economy? How can we bring business and industry? And there should be investment. One thing that amazes me is you go to Worcester, I think there's 11 colleges in Worcester. Brockton, we have Massasoit. I mean, we know that associate degrees are going to be in demand going forward over the next 10 years. We should be either expanding Massasoit or putting an entirely new junior college somewhere in the vicinity of Brockton. That's the investment I'm looking to make in this area. So I think it's important to grow your own revenue, but yes, as far as the budget goes, I know Brockton gets, I think, upwards probably of 42% of their revenue from state aid. Some of the smaller communities, including my own, I think we get maybe 20%. So when tough times hit and you're dependent on that state revenue, Brockton gets disproportionately harder than the other communities. So I would propose doing some type of legislation that would be, in effect, a circuit breaker. So when there's a reduction, it's not simply a same percentage deduction across the board. It's got to account for the gateway cities such as Brockton.
I see. Now, you mentioned earlier Tim Cahill running for, the current treasurer running for governor. There's going to be a new treasurer.
Yes.
What would you do to ensure that Brockton and your other areas get their fair share of the lottery revenue? That's a big question all the time. We know Brockton buys an inordinate amount of tickets to the lottery. What type of things could you do to really
it's
ensure that?
ironic you mentioned that, and you didn't know this before me coming on the show today, but I had interned for State Senator Michael Creedon many years ago. I think it was back in 1991 or 1992. And one of the pieces of legislation that I worked on was actually a reformulation of lottery revenue for the distribution to cities and towns. That formula, as it stands now, is heavily skewed towards property values, not towards sales. And it should be really a percentage of sales. If it were geared that way, Brockton would get what I would say it's his fair share. Because most of the sales, and I forget what the statistic was at that time, may have been as much as 8 or 9% of total lottery revenue came from the city of Brockton.
Yeah, I know it's
a high
I think
percentage.
Brockton is in the top 4 or 5.
So that money should be coming back here. That's an equitable issue, and that should be something that's brought up every year until it passes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty well known amongst all of us that play a ticket or two that the more affluent communities don't play as much lottery as the blue-collar communities do. It's just
If I could find the study,
that's
I'd
just
show
a
you.
fact. You know,
It's
I mean,
true. It's absolutely true.
You can ask any of us, you know. Now, a lot has been talked in the news about, and we just had a bullying legislation up on Beacon Hill. Do you see that more as a city issue? We had Representative Lynch in here a while back, and he saw that more as a local and city issue than a national issue. How do you have you developed any feelings on it? I mean, it's been bounced around quite a bit lately.
You know, it's a different situation, and I think schools are different than they were when you and I went to school. If we get in a fight in school, and I had my fair share, you know, I was afraid of going home and having to tell my parents. That was the death knell for me. You know, it's one thing what the school did to you. You were scared to death of what your parents were going to do. Something's happened in our culture, and that's changed. I think a lot of kids don't have that inherent fear of their parents, and as a result, they run roughshod over people. And that's wrong. I'd like to see parents held more accountable for their actions of their kids, at least until they're age 18. I think that's only fair. I remember the old saying, and I think it holds true, and probably in your household too. If you live under my roof, you go by my rules.
That's right, yeah.
And it makes sense. And sadly, it made sense at the time. I didn't want to admit that to my parents, but it did. And I'd like to see a little bit more done in terms of parental responsibility. I don't think teachers should have to act as if they're the parent all the time. Their job is to teach these students, and I think they're in a position, and it's hard, and I give them a lot of credit because they do a great job, especially here in Brockton, but they can't be the full-time parent and the full-time teacher.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of one-parent households. It's a tough thing. Now, a lot of people, when we talk about bullying, a lot of people, some people mesh it together with general school safety, school policing, stuff like that. Other people think it should be a separate thing from school policing and school safety in general. How do you see it?
Again, I think it's a tough dynamic because, you know, so much of what's happening in schools is different. You've got texting/sexting going on. These are issues we never had to deal with. I think the key is to get everybody on the same page, and it's not just a school issue, it's not just a community issue. You've got to have, whether it's the mayor's office and the schools working together, or the city council, mayor and the schools, they all have to be focused on the same issue. And I think when you have a collaborative approach and a comprehensive strategy, then you're actually going to be able to deal with this problem a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah. So do you see it as more of an issue for the local superintendents to handle, or would you like to see the national government get involved?
I think